Tree thinking. Humans love to sort things into groups. We sort foods into fruits, vegetables, meat, fish, and grains. We group the clothes in our closets and then sort them by color. We sort vertebrates into mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. We sort seashells found on a beach. For a long time, scientists have looked for systems for naming and grouping the diversity of life. In the mid-1700s, a Swedish scientist named Carolus Linnaeus organized living things into groups. He studied the characteristics of organisms. Then he grouped them based on their similarities and differences. Other scientists began to look at fossils to study the life's history. The scientists also used similarities and differences to classify life. As more organisms were found, scientists began to look for new ways to group them. A branching tree. About 100 years later, Charles Darwin suggested organizing life in a tree pattern. The branching tree he sketched suggests that all life on Earth is related. Each branching point on Darwin's tree represents a common ancestor that divided into descendants. The root of the tree is the ancestor of all the species on the tree of life. Today, scientists still use Darwin's tree thinking to model evolution. They make hypotheses about the relationships among species using a tree diagram called cladogram. A cladogram maps patterns of relatedness based on patterns of shared inherited characteristics called traits. To be useful in making a cladogram, a trait must have been inherited by two or more of the species on the tree. It must have appeared for the first time in those species' most recent common ancestor. Extinct species can be included in the cladogram. Look at the portion of the example from class at the top of the next page. In Linnaeus' time, scientists used similar observed traits to group organisms. So they might group the shark and the tuna. Both have eyes and fins. The cladogram, however, puts the tuna and frog together. This is because their most recent common ancestor had a bony skeleton. This trait, bony skeleton, first appeared in the most recent common ancestor of the tuna and frog. Sharks do not have bony skeletons. This tells us that the tuna and frog are more closely related than either is to the shark. We have to go further back in time to find a most recent common ancestor for the shark, tuna, and frog. As you can see, on the cladogram, the ancestor had vertebrae. Cladogram shark, tuna, frog. Most recent common ancestor of shark, tuna, and frog. The circles indicate a node, and that's where you find the most recent common ancestor. The ancestors are not the shark, the tuna, and the frog. The ancestor is the mammal or the animal that shared that particular characteristic before it branched off into the other organisms. What a cladogram tells us. A cladogram shows the order in which traits appeared. It does not represent a simple line from ancestor to descendant. This is important to think about. The shark is not the ancestor of the tuna and frog. Instead, the shark, tuna, and frog share a common ancestor at a branching point, or the node. Also, a frog is not more evolved than the shark. Each has different traits that allow it to thrive in its environment. Finally, a cladogram shows that one trait evolved in a group of organisms before or after another trait. For instance, vertebrae evolved before a bony skeleton did. To find out how long before, you need to look at the fossil record. The cladogram does not tell you. A cladogram is only as accurate as the information used to construct it. Scientists may use physical characteristics such as the arrangement of bones in a limb, or they might use the kind of tissue or reproductive structures of a plant. Using only physical characteristics require careful study. A hypothesis. Consider the hyrax, the manatee, and the elephant. At first, they don't appear to be related, but the hyrax and the manatee are two of the closest living relatives of the elephant. They share a most recent common ancestor. What evidence support this relationship? Careful observation of physical traits reveals several unusual shared characteristics, such as small tucks, similar toenails and bone shapes, and excellent hearing. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, analysis shows similarities among the hyrax, the manatee, and the elephant. In addition, some 40 million-year-old fossils in Africa provide evidence that a mammal about the size of a pig is the most recent common ancestor of these species. A cladogram is a hypothesis about the relationships among groups of organisms. It represents our best model of evolutionary relationships. It changes as new fossils or genetic information is discovered. What cladograms reveal is that all living things are part of one huge bushy tree. They share a 3.8 billion year old common aquatic ancestor. As we gather more evidence and develop new methods for examining traits, our view of the tree of life becomes clearer. And this is the end of the article that we shared in class today. I will be back for more content. Have a wonderful afternoon. Feel free to watch this at any time.